All right, greetings. Howdy, y'all. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. We'll give it a second here as more folks are coming in through the waiting room. Showing a minute after. We'll give it just one more second, but thanks so much for joining us. All right, we got a good consensus here. Great group. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We're excited for another edition of our NATO educational webinars. Again, I'm really glad to have you all here. I know many of you may be, depending on where you are, hunkered down in the cold weather and snow. And so I hope you are warm and safe. But hey, no better place than when it's cold and snowy to tune into a NATO education. And so we're glad you could be here for that. We're certainly envious of those of you that may be in warmer weather. So enjoy that. My name is Jack Morgan, Director of Programs here at NATO. And so for those that may be joining us from outside our membership, just a quick refresher. So NATO is the National Association of Development Organizations. We are the national membership association and network for regional planning and economic development districts, depending on where you are and in what state. They go by many different names. You may know them as councils of government or economic development districts, but broadly we'll use the term RDOs, regional development organizations, for NATO's sake and the sake of this discussion. So you may hear that term throughout the webinar today. We do have a really great discussion for you, highlighting several of our folks representing RDOs, as well as the private sector and subject matter experts from our partners and friends at EcoStrat. So hopefully you're in the right place. We're going to be talking about biofuel and bio-based economic development and what's called BDO zones and grant-funded opportunities for you all to take advantage of that, support your communities, and drive job growth. So I'll turn it over in a second, but just a couple quick housekeeping remarks. This will be recorded. This webinar will be recorded. We'll post the recording for future viewing on NATO's website, as well as a copy of the slide deck for your future reference. We are going to try to save time for question and answer after our various presentations and discussions. So you feel free to go ahead and put questions throughout the presentations in the chat, and we will try our best to address those. Be sure to flag any tech issues or other questions you may have. NATO staff is on board and can monitor the chat and address anything as best we can. So with that, I'm going to turn it over for some other welcoming remarks. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Robert Venables. Robert hails from Southeast Conference, the more important Southeast Conference, our RDO member up in Alaska. So Robert is you're going to hear from Robert a little later about this topic and BDO zones in his neck of the woods. But Robert is our West Region representative on the NATO Executive Committee and currently serving as our second vice president. So, Robert, won't you say a few welcoming remarks to set the stage and then introduce our guests from EcoStrat?
All right, thanks, Jack. Yes, I'm the executive director for Southeast Conference. That's not to be confused with the Southeastern Conference, which, believe it or not, we get phone calls and emails complaining about the officiating at the Southeastern Conference events quite frequently. So not to be confused. I get to wear two hats, as Jack said. I'll get the chance to weigh in later on as in my role as executive director for the Economic Development District. But first, I get to welcome you on behalf of NATO. I have the privilege of serving as second vice president. And one of the things that the board did over the last couple of years was put together, the strategic plan to cover the years 2025, 2030. And, right front and center, right off the bat, the first priority was ensure member success. And, one of the key points underneath that was to, locate, find, identify funding resources and opportunities, especially non-EDA. And so this webinar today is geared right along in that line. So just another one of the member benefits. If you're not a member, that'll be a separate conversation. We'll be happy to have with you as well. So you can see value. And I want to also invite you all to participate in our DC fly-in, which will be next month, March 8th through 11th. So just want to put that out there. So welcome again to everyone. And I want to, first off, just thank, EcoStrat. So they've been participating in our annual training conference, which we have in the fall, and have been participating there, introducing opportunities and technical assistance. So really appreciate them, and you'll hear from them today as they offer the remarks on this topic in front of us. But starting off, we'll hear from Jordan Solomon, who's the president and CEO. And I'm going to turn it over to Ryan Magwood, who's going to kind of help facilitate the session here today. He's the manager of business development, and really help set those BDO ratings that we'll be talking about. So with that, Ryan, I'm going to just turn it over to you, and then I'll go change hats and be back in a little bit.
Perfect. Thank you, Robert. Well, great to meet you all. My name is Ryan Magwood. As Robert said and mentioned, I'm our business development manager here at EcoStrat, working under the BDO Zone initiative. So I'm going to pass things over to our president and CEO, Jordan Solomon here, who's just going to talk a little bit more about BDO Zone ratings, what they are, and how they can support communities in terms of attracting bio-based projects to their region. So I'll kick things over to yourself, Jord, and just pull up this deck.
Thank you, Ryan. And look, I just want to open by uh, just expressing how grateful we are at the BDO Zone Initiative and EcoStrat to NATO in general, but Jack and Robert and the other leadership at NATO for giving us the opportunity to support your it's over 450 member organizations across to um, maybe help be a force multiplier to do what they do, but even better. And I'm looking forward to talking about exactly how BDO zone ratings can act as an economic development tool to empower rural prosperity, to enable energy independence, and to get more plants built. Like you'll hear from Nick Andrews, the CEO of US Biofuels, um, in a moment, but to get more of those types of plants built. But why BDO zone ratings? We know they work. I think it's important to say as an economic development tool. And we know that they work because they've only been around for just about 3 years. And in that 3 years, there have been $10 billion of project announcements for which capital is being raised today, right now, in BDO zones. You'll hear from one of them today. In addition to that $10 billion of project announcements in BDO zones, there's another $30 billion of projects that haven't been announced yet, and most of them, quite frankly, won't be announced. But if the data runs to form, 10% of them will be. So there's another $3 billion that we can expect should come across the line sometime this year in terms of plant announcements. One of the other things I think it's so important to understand is we now, after almost 3 years, have the data to understand what the average annual economic impact is of an announced BDO zone project. And that figure is $423 million per project. And I'll show you where that comes from right now. It comes from a study by University of Tennessee. Some of you may know Dr. Burton English. For those of you who don't, he's arguably and certainly one of the leading agricultural economists in the country. And Bert and Bert's team invented the economic output models that predict the impact of a biofuels plant on a region. And we're happy to send this to you. Just reach out in the chat. We'll send it to you before this webinar is over. But this is a very interesting article by one of the leading minds in the country today, showing that according to the state of the science economic impact projection models, that figure per year is 423 million. Frankly, what they did is they took 6 announced plants in BDO zones and took the average economic impact of those 6 actual plant announcements. So, what is a BDO zone rating? It's for those of you who don't know, it's a standards-based assessment of how good a region is to site a new biofuel, renewable chemical, biogas, or bioproduct plant. And what they do is they send really powerful signals. They're recognized by project developers all over the world that a particular region is what we call regionally ready for biomanufacturing or biomanufacturing ready. You can think of them as site location bullseyes for project developers. And look, project developers are so much like everyone, I imagine, that's listening to this webinar right now. You're time constrained. Thank you very much for making the time for this webinar, by the way. Our bandwidth is chock a block full, and it takes an important signal to cut through that noise. And that's what a BDO zone rating is. They're a signal that are recognized all over the world. And by doing that, no surprise, they tend to attract new plants and new inbound calls from project developers that want to build plants. So what happens when a region says, hey, I'd like a BDO zone rating? Well, that region has to be assessed. There's due diligence that's carried out on that region. And basically, the region is assessed for what we call the 3 pillars of a BDO zone rating. Those 3 pillars are feedstock surplus, number 1. Is there a sustainably sourced available amount of feedstock in there that could support a biofuels, a renewable chemical, a biogas plant? How much is there? Is there 50,000 tons? Is there 500,000 tons? Number 2, supply chain strength. Are there people? Are there sawmills? Are there forestry producers? Are there farmers that together would combine to provide biomass if there was a plant there? Supply chain strength. And number 3, sound infrastructure. Does the region present good infrastructure that could support an operating plant? Roads, workforce, gas hookup, electricity, etc. And to the extent that these regions rate high enough on these 3 pillars, they get a rating. And the ratings go from AAA, AA, A, triple B, and lower. Anything triple B, even double B or lower is, or I should say anything double B or really higher is commonly considered to be, by and large, anywhere from a good to an excellent place to drop in a new biofuel plant. Think of it as places that would give a biofuels plant a soft landing. These ratings are the signal. I do want to pause here on this slide just for a second, and I'm going to wrap in just 2 more minutes to say this. Look, the market is not magic, meaning it doesn't react, it can't react to information it doesn't have, right? So from the point of view of project developers, most of our rural regions around the nation are functionally invisible because they don't know it's a good reason to build a plant. Why would they call you? They won't. The market doesn't react to information it doesn't have. By providing the due diligence in an easy to understand form, a rating that's recognized all over the world, that's why these zones drive so much inbound interest on behalf of project developers all over the world. Another reason is that they're recognized and they're credible. These ratings are issued within the framework of credible national standards. In the US, developed with Idaho National Labs under the US Department of Energy. In Canada, developed under the CSA technical specification, and about to be an ASTM accredited national US standard by Christmas this year. Also, I think it's important that this is the plan of the former administration's USDA to build out the bioeconomy in America. Almost nothing is referenced more often in the USDA's plan from March 2024 than BDO zones as an effective tool to drive new inflow of business to our regions. You can see on the next slide some of the places where there's BDO zones, but I want to move quickly to the numbers. Right now, today, there are 61 BDO zones, the vast majority in the US, around 50. There are 30 developing projects, but there's that $10 billion figure. That's projects announced in BDO zones. But the most important figure is that one on your lower left of your screen where it says 850 per rating. That is the number of downloads that a BDO zone rating gets. Remember, these are extensive, data-filled, relatively boring, if I can be honest, ratings of suitability to build a new plant, meaning you don't download them unless you're actually a project developer looking to seriously look at dropping in a plant into this region. And that happens 850 times per rating. We know that because we can track it. So just for those of you who are economic developers in the audience, and most of you are, just imagine, think back to the past year, how many inbound calls you had from project developers. BDO zones get, on average, 850. It all happens within the first year. Ryan, I think I want to show you Nick's rate. This is USA Bioenergy's rating. It was the very first AA rating. I'm going to leave it to Nick Andrews, the CEO of USA Bioenergy, to talk about this rating in Wier in a moment. But I want to spend the last two slides talking about how BDO zone ratings raise the profile. They're a force multiplier for NATO economic developers. One, because global press releases go out to national infrastructure media all over the place, direct distribution to hundreds of active project developers in the BDO Zone Project Developer Network. Really, the result is that your region shows up earlier, stronger, and more often in site selection pipelines of the people that are actually looking to drop these plants across the United States. Number two, putting your region in front of capital, and also more projects. We do BDO Zone Connect webinars. You can look at them if you click in the bottom left corner of your screen after this. You'll all get this presentation. But basically, BDO Zone leaders are put on once a month on BDO Zone Connect webinars. These are broadcast to millions of readers and hundreds of thousands of viewers. On average, live and time shifted, and again, we know because we can track it, these receive on Digest TV 800 to 1,500 viewers per event. And that translates into exposure, and that feeds into that 850 downloads figure, which is so vitally important. I'm not going to go through this slide, but I just want to show you these are the project developers in the Project Developer Network. This isn't even all of them because we can't fit them all on a slide, right? This is the world's largest network of companies actively developing the kind of plants that y'all want in your region. BDO Zone ratings go to every one of them. Again, that's what drives 850 on average views. Finally, I think I'm just going to wrap with this. This is real ratings from real people, just like many of you on this call who have heard about BDO Zone ratings, but then they got them, and this is their message. And if we can play that, sometimes it doesn't work, but we'll see.
We had one paper mill shut down, and that crippled the pulp market out here.
We're a rural community with a lot of smaller towns who are just decimated as automation and increased efficiencies just shuttered the workforce.
I have had a number of companies, upwards of 20, that have contacted me simply because they found us on the BDO zone.
You know, we're a community, a county of about 45,000. As soon as our rating went out, we started getting calls.
We immediately began to receive calls from across the U.S.
Yeah, so we wouldn't be approaching phase one on a multi-million-dollar project if it weren't for EcoStrat's BDO Zone.
Approximately a $5 million investment up to a regional facility, which is a $25 million or more investment into our community.
We were able to land all four. The construction phase alone for the four of them total would be about $1 billion.
Our goal is to develop a series of advanced fuels facilities to build 12. And so we constantly are eager to see what's happening with the BDOZ. What's the new site coming online?
Yeah, BDO Zone rating definitely impacted our decision to look into Vegreville. Each one of these biorefineries will have about 100-ish jobs for the construction side of things, probably 400 to 500 over a 2-year period. Literally be tens of millions of dollars locally.
1,000 people are going to be working on the construction side for the first 2 to 3 years. Permanent jobs we're anticipating are 200.
Probably see 1,000 people directly employed on site during the 2-year construction cycle. Somewhere around 125 permanent full-time jobs. Extends that to about 1,000 indirect jobs.
But I believe we're going to generate over $500 million in revenue to the local taxing district over the first 20 years of operation. This county is one of the lowest per capita income counties in the entire state of Texas. The impact that's going to have on the schools, everybody who lives there.
It's exciting to be able to go out to these smaller communities with realistic opportunities that they would have never seen before, directly as a result of the BDO.
When these facilities are brought into a lot of these rural areas, those are high impact jobs, and they give those communities an opportunity for their young people to stay at home.
So with that, I think I'm going to pass it back to you, Ryan, to talk about funding support for BDO zones.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Jordan. And yeah, I'll talk a little bit more about funding opportunities that are available that can support some of these communities. But what I kind of just want to do first here is I'm just going to pass it back to a couple of different speakers that we have today who've actually gone through the process of receiving a BDO zone rating for their region and have actually utilized some grant and funding opportunities in the past as well. So I know you've already heard from Robert Venables, the executive director up in the Southeast Conference in Alaska, but we also have Laura Lewis Marancino, the executive director from the Region 9 Economic Development District down in southwestern Colorado. So what I'm just going to do here is pull up another slide deck that we have and pass things off to Robert just to talk a little bit more about his rating, specifically in the Prince of Wales in Alaska, and just the process that he went through in obtaining a rating for his region. So, Robert, I'll pass things back to you.
All right, thank you. Thank you both. Just for a quick context, Southeast Alaska and Prince of Wales Island is in the heart of the Tongass National Forest, and about 25, 30 years ago, the Roadless Rule came out and it became very political. And after reacting for about 25 years and, seeing our forest community economies just paralyzed, we realized that we could continue that and reacting to the closures and, the tariffs and all of the market disruptions that go along with that. And very sadly, lots of lost jobs, infrastructure and the investment that went along with that, or we could take a look at how do we build new infrastructure? How do we, pursue the niche markets that we can do with new mills and processing facilities? But we needed the data to go along with that in order to capture the value that we could be created with the place-based economy. So that's really what drove us to EcoStrat. And just for the next slide, just I do this for any time I'm talking to national audiences because just context is everything, right? So we're down in the in that lower panhandle. You see the lower right screen. You go to the next slide. It kind of embeds that, blows it up a little bit to let you see those are the islanded communities. And the Prince of Wales Island is the lower left where you see all those little dots. Those were pretty much, for the most part, logging camps that endured and became municipalities in due course. And much of the infrastructure for those communities were built off the logging roads and the economies that the forest provided. And so, anyway, that's just a little bit about us as an organization. And the next slide, is just an excerpt from our SEDS. So that is, one of our objectives in our comprehensive economic development strategy that says, yes, we need to prioritize securing an adequate economic timber supply. So how do we do that? Especially with the fact that, there's only less than 1% of the lands that are in private hands. So it's a challenge to work on the public infrastructure. And so what I loved about Jordan talked about data, and the next slide, really the overview, because I'll tell you what our rating was, and we knew this going in, was not investment grade. But it helped us to identify all the different categories that that goes into those issues. And those categories on the next slide, kind of speaks to the broad tenets of what an economy is based on, whatever business you're in. But as you can see, it's all trees out there, trees and water. So how do we position the region to be able to understand what the opportunities are? And so the next slide just kind of really does your typical SWOT analysis, where identify the key assets and the key liabilities there, and the stuff that people know intuitively, but to put it into a package that can be marketed to potential businesses, stakeholders, policymakers, all those sort of things, is what helps us create economies, and especially what we were focused on with place-based economy. So and admittedly, the next slide dives into those liabilities, because that's what you have to address. You've got to address each one of these access, workforce, all these sort of things. And I really appreciated the format that EcoStrat helped us to develop as we take a look at how do we focus on the things that will move the needle to create these new markets, because we can't fight the old battles with the old resources and the old way of thinking. We've got to take a look at what the future opportunities are, the future markets, and so the final slide is actually a quote back from from Jordan, as we took a look at the different clusters that could be created. And sometimes he focused on the glorious ones that in that video clip, they can go on to do great things, and eventually we hope to be on one of those video calls that says, yes, we did it too. But the fact is, we've got limitations. So even if your region, your project area may not be quite ready for prime time, it's never too early to get the data sets and start doing the planning. And that's what we are. So many of the economic development districts were planners. And so we have to play the long game, but it's got to start. The foundation for every project is good data. And so that's what we pursued this for. And we're still using it, and we're going to continue to build that future economy out of the forest. So anyway, that's what I wanted to kind of give a highlight on. A picture's worth 1,000 words, and they only told me I had 1,000 words to say. So I kind of want to be judicious there. So anyway, thanks.
Yeah, well, thank you, Robert. That really paints a great picture there. And I really just want to pass things over now to Laura down in southwestern Colorado to talk a little bit more about her rating and her experience with going through this process. So, Laura, I'll pass things over to you.
Thank you so much, Ryan. And Robert, I really appreciate you setting up kind of the more rural area, because that is a lot of what we've experienced. And I guess I don't have pictures worth 1,000 words, so you have to look at my face. So I apologize. Our region, as Ryan said, is in Southwest Colorado, and it includes 5 counties, 10 cities and towns, and 2 tribal reservations. Our population's about 100,000. So we're right in the Four Corners area. And we really pursued a BDO zone rating to help diversify our rural economy and revitalize our timber industry in the 1970s. If you've been in the mountains of Colorado, you know it too has a lot of trees. But we were trying to figure out what to do with fire hazards, with bark beetle, how can we get into some of our forest lands and really look at creating businesses, because our state, though not as much public land as Alaska, is about 65%. So you are working with public land managers, you're working with private landowners and all of that. I should say we got a BBB rating for our woody biomass, and I feel like it helped us build our readiness for biofuels. Again, we still are in kind of the beginning stages. We did our study 6 months ago. I wanted to talk more specifics of our work with EcoStrat and working with USDA on loan programs, because I know a lot of you may be interested in that. We were really happy with our level of detail in the study. I can copy it into the chat if needed. That was some of the information we really needed. And we were unique in that we have a lot of scatter site kind of timber operations. And so our zone, rather than being one area where a plant could locate, we had several. We felt we were truly regional, and EcoStrat and the consultants really worked with us on that. So our zone kind of covers 2 counties with some pockets of activity. We have an employment and regional center kind of between where a lot of our timber activity is. And we were really interested in kind of trying to have better linkages, between those urban areas and, where we wanted to have our timber and build that ecosystem. So we did apply for a RBDG grant through USDA. And I have to admit, EcoStrat was great. They actually wrote the majority of the grant. Obviously we edited and provided information. We did put in staff match, which I would recommend if you look at that going forward, because even though EcoStrat can provide the match and you're pretty much ready to go, you do spend a lot of time on this study. You are spending time with consultants. So we committed that as in-kind match. We did a $90,000 grant. We got it. And EcoStrat provided all the information we needed in order to submit quarterly reports, all of that. And along the process, once we received the grant, they did, several check-ins. We met the consultants. We got to work with them. We provided the contacts, local context. But they basically did, I would say, 90% of the lift. And that was really helpful because this was a project we didn't really have the capacity to take on without some of this support. So I just wanted to acknowledge how important that was to us being in a rural area. And then within the last month, we've actually done one of the webinars to try to promote our project. We've taken the press that EcoStrat also provides. We've localized it within our area. So we feel like it gave us an opportunity to kind of go international with our potential projects, but also on boots on the ground, we could kind of distribute locally. And I feel like we will have smaller projects just with kind of the findings of the study, but we're also looking at, can we be a supply chain for some larger areas, or can we help with some business growth of existing businesses that are already there, fill niches and smaller projects. One thing just to note, not a negative at all, but with having so much USDA grant applications, we were asked by USDA, are you sure you really need this? Is this something that would be important? And we said yes, and they believe us. And so just know that USDA has different offices, but they're all talking and they're very aware of the business development zone. So you need to make sure that it is something that you want to pursue and that you can make them comfortable that this is what you want to do. We would not have done it without not just EcoStrat's help, but also having our local governments really prioritize this. And they felt it was extremely important to our region to just look at this as an opportunity. We didn't know that it was out there. And then we learned more about BDO Zones. We went on the website, did all our homework and that type of thing, and have been really happy. We don't have a project yet, but I know we're in those early stages. And again, the study in and of itself is also a product that we're very happy with. So I'll wait and take questions later, but I just wanted to give you kind of our perspective of this project. Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Laura. And if anyone on the call today is interested in learning a little bit more about Laura's BDO zone down in southwestern Colorado, or Robert's BDO zone in the Southeast Conference of Alaska, those ratings, along with all other ratings, are available to view and download for free on our website if you want to check out some of those. But now, just in terms of moving things along here, I'm going to pass things over to Andrew Harmon, the Deputy Director for the Deep East Texas Council of Governments, along with Nick Andrews, the CEO of USA Bioenergy, just to talk about that case study that Jordan briefly mentioned and highlighted and touched on within the BDO Zone rating in Wier, Texas, and this specific facility, to talk a little bit more about the impact of the region that this project is going to have on the Deep East region in Texas here. So Andrew and Nick, I'll pass things over to you.
Sure. I guess I can get us kicked off here, Nick, and give everybody kind of an overview of the region. I'm Andrew Harmon with the Deep East Texas Council of Governments. I think we're in good company here today, so I can spare us the 45 minutes of what a COG does and what a planning commission does. But I think at the beginning of the presentation today, Jordan really hit the nail on the head that our rural communities here, especially, I can't speak for everyone, but a lot of our rural communities are essentially invisible without a true rating system. Even if we have the data in place, it still is a need for our communities to be represented through this process. I won't directly speak for the agencies, but it's a selling point to our entire board too, to participate in this process when they see the results, obviously here in the region with USA Bioenergy and all the work that Nick and his team have done here so far, but also that organizations and agencies like USDA essentially have a stamp of approval on it because they are funding efforts like this across the country. And I think they had 50 ratings in the United States. That's a huge selling point for our board and really rallied our communities behind this. But when we look at a place like Deep East Texas, Nick mentioned in a few points in the video that was shown earlier that there are communities that are very distressed, like Newton County, where that Wier plant is selected to go. And these communities are going to have a transformational shift. When we think of the word energy in Deep East Texas, a lot of the times, similar across the country, it's that oil and gas industry. And that makes sense here locally, but really energy today, especially in our communities, isn't just about drilling anymore. It's about things that we have access to, like the land, like feedstock. We've got good logistics here, solid infrastructure and access in our communities. And when you start looking at energy in that perspective, economy in decline like Deep East Texas actually lines up pretty well with where energy is going in the future. And I think that that's really just the shift that's taking place. We look at our local economies here, and we've got landowners, loggers, and rural communities that have really suffered. A lot of our paper mills have closed down, but it also creates an opportunity where the material and the infrastructure already exists, and it's just essentially creating a new demand source for these operations, which is exactly what's going to happen in Newton County as we move forward. And I saw a comment that posted earlier about, rural communities going on ahead and collecting the data for themselves. But I think that one of the components of this process with BDO Zone and EcoStrat is really the credibility behind that data. It's not just one challenge for us to collect it. That's a whole problem in itself for us locally here. But actually being able to promote that and get that information out there and have that stamp of approval that this isn't just something that we pulled out of our hat here at Deep East Texas. Like, you can take what I say at face value. I can look around and say, we've got a lot of trees, we've got the good infrastructure, we probably have a good enough amount of feedstock to support your operation. But when it comes time to get an underwriter or financing for those projects, I mean, my word is, as goes as far as about you could throw me. So I think that's really where EcoStrat and the BDO Zone rating come in. And I think for us at DebtCog, we've got a lot of excitement about this project that's taking place in Newton, and we're trying to put together another rating to essentially cover the other half of our region, which is what we're pursuing right now at this time. So we're kind of seeing the beginning and end of this process. But I think for us, the goal really isn't to promise a new plant tomorrow. It's to move from a reactive to a proactive region. And, we don't want to have the situation come up where we've got a company or a site selector call us and say, what do you guys have? Can y'all support this industry here? And we're just starting from scratch at that point. So we're applying to the USDA funding right now so that we can essentially finish up the coverage of our region. And we really appreciate the assistance of EcoStrat through that process. And at the end of the day, I think that what our goal is here locally is to take what we already have and turn it into something that investors and developers can trust. And I think that's the role of the BDO Zone. But I'll pass it over to Nick now to talk a little bit more about what he's got going on here.
Thank you, Andrew. So I like that word credibility when it comes to the BDOZ. I think that's exactly what it does. And there's a little blurb out of the press release we did in, October of 2022 when we were the first ever AA rating, which is something I'm very proud of, by the way. It says Wier BDOZ is rated AA for very low risk based on numerous positive indicators such as strong surplus of available biomass, a large number of potential anchor suppliers, and a healthy forest labor market and infrastructure within the region. That builds a lot of credibility. And who all does that build credibility with? Well, it builds credibility with additional suppliers, right? Suppliers within our supply basin are going to feel confident about that. The community support that we get by announcing such a thing is tremendous. We get people excited about what's possible. And in East Texas, we've had a lot of support from the associations, including Deep Texas or Deep East Texas, Texas Forest Country Partnership, Texas Association or Texas Forestry Association. Some of the political figures that have gotten behind us in regards to just this additional support is Congressman Brian Babin, who helped us get a grant to upgrade the rail line from Kirbyville to DeRidder. We work with Governor Greg Abbott and his team, Adriana Cruz and Nancy Wyndham from Texas Forest Country Partnership to achieve $150 million in incentives, which are largely property tax abatement and job training reimbursement. Some of those comfort letters that Nancy was able to garner, there were 25 of them in total, including Senator Robert Nichols and Travis Clardy and Trent Ashby. I mean, and all of these people came together to support us. And I would say that the BDOZ was very helpful in building the credibility that we had, the minimum requirements that we needed for our primary feedstock, which is really important. And I always like to say, besides my faith in God, I have an audience of one, and that's the lender. And the lender always tells you what they want, not always what they need. And what they want is investment grade across the board, including feedstock, offtake, technology. And so here's a quote here from David Livingstone, who's our lead underwriter at Barclays. When it comes to feedstock, you have to have long-term fixed price contracts with creditworthy providers for significant volume of feedstock needs. Okay, how do we verify that? How do we third party put a solid check in that box? Well, a BDOZ does that, right? That's a very detailed third party report that goes into granular detail about how much fiber is within the supply basin to support the project. And we need to know. Matter of fact, we've done several studies with EcoStrat, and we've done the grant almost every time. And what we found is some of these locations meet our minimum requirements, and some of them do not. And we don't know that sometimes going in. We see a property, it's got trees for miles. We think we're going to be in terrific shape here. And then when the study comes back, it's a little bit short of our minimum requirements. So the value and the credibility that you get from the BDO Zine from us has been terrific. When it comes to the different types of studies that EcoStrat does, I'm familiar with not only forest thinnings but also corn stover and chicken litter. So there's a lot of different categories in which they're willing to help. And so I'm pleased to be here in support of Jordan Solomon and his work. I remember when he started the BDOZ. I love being a part of it. Happy to support the industry. One thing that often is not talked about is that many of these rural properties are located in opportunity zones. And opportunity zones are exactly how you can begin to defer your capital gain if you're an investor and you're needing to try to defer your capital gain. And not every property is in an opportunity zone, but I love the fact that it's a BDOZ, right? And sometimes we don't talk enough about the OZ part of it. And we've set up different opportunity zone funds in order to support our investors who may want to defer some of their capital gain when investing in our projects. And I know Burton English was mentioned earlier, and I'm a huge fan of Burton. Matter of fact, he was an early advisor. A lot of people don't realize that he was one of the authors of the billion-ton study. So the folks that Jordan's working with and collaborating with to come up with these studies and especially at the University of Tennessee, they do terrific work there. Nothing against Texas A&M, which I'm like very proud of. They've done a terrific job in supporting our efforts there in East Texas. And I'm trying to think what else I may be willing to share here that's helpful for the overall discussion here today. I will say that just funding these types of projects is a three-legged stool. You have to have feedstock, you have to have offtake, and you have to have technology. It's a combination of those three that allow you to stand up a project, and they're all equally important. You got to have an offtake agreement with an investment grade counterparty and again, the underwriter always tells you what they want. They'd like to have a 20-year commitment for that. And that's not always easy to do. And then a technology selection that gives you ultimately an EPC with a single point of accountability. This is like that one throat to choke concept that the underwriter continues to hit us with. And in the case of feedstock, we were able to garner so much interest within our supply basin that we were ultimately able to get Louisiana Pacific Corporation to come on board and be our feedstock procurement partner and manage the 50 or so suppliers within our supply basin. And I think, partially doing that BDOZ and building that credibility early allowed us to get all of the community support, get the stakeholders behind us, give the lenders the confidence that they're seeking. And so I'm a big fan of the BDOZ, and I'm looking forward to the question and answer section of the conversation today.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Nick. Appreciate that insight. And yeah, great that you're also able to mention that woody biomass is just one stream of feedstock that can be looked at. I know that's also the stream that we looked at within Laura's rating and Robert's as well in Colorado and Alaska. But there's a number of different streams, as you'd mentioned, corn stover, different agriculture residuals. We've issued a couple of ratings for feedstocks like poultry litter. We got one that we're currently working on for manure. Really just depends on the region and what the largest quantities are of that are being produced and what's your best asset that you're looking to market. So what I'll do now, just before we wrap things up here, is I'm just gonna share just one slide deck here, and just this one slide to talk a little bit more about a free self-assessment tool that communities can take when deciding whether or not a BDO zone rating might make sense for their region. So we have something that's called BDO SAT. This is a free self-assessment tool that you can take to get an initial preliminary opinion for how your region might score. It's a 15-minute questionnaire. After you fill out the questions within the questionnaire, it'll spit out a high-level opinion for how you might score, this is really the best starting point to take. And happy to walk through anyone on this initial starting point within this initial test tool if you want to schedule a call with us following the call today with our team. But just to wrap things up here, I'm going to talk just about a couple of funding opportunities that are available that can support communities in helping cover the cost of the rating for their region. So the first is through the USDA, and this is the Rural Business Development Grant. This is the one that Laura spoke about. This is actually the one that supported her rating up in southwestern Colorado, and then also Roberts in the Prince of Wales and Alaska. So the RBDG is able to cover 100% of total project cost towards a BDO zone rating for your region. In the last 3 years, we've supported over 60 applications. We're seeing that there's about an 80 or so percent success rate in terms of making these applications. And EcoStrat also provides full service grant writing services to help support and, as Laura said, really take on the majority of the application here for this program. As USDA grants, if you're not familiar, can be a little bit of an onerous project to take on yourself. So there's this upcoming funding deadline that is approaching near the end of February here, and I just want to highlight a few current target states where we are actually looking to still support an applicant in for this upcoming round. So these are 26 target states that we're looking to support an applicant in for this program specifically. So if you're a community or region who's interested in learning more about this and are within any of these states listed here, feel free to reach out to me. My email is ryan@ecostrat.com. You can also, I'll just share some more information on the next slide here, but these are a couple of other different funding opportunities through the Economic Development Administration. So the first here is their Economic Adjustments Program, and this can cover up to 60 to 80% of total project costs. This one is actually a rolling application. So applications are open and they're currently being accepted. This is EDA's most flexible program that supports economic development activities nationwide. The second one here is the 4-year 25 Disaster Supplemental Program, and this is through their implementation path specifically. So this program can cover anywhere between 80% to 100% of total project costs. And similar to the other program, has a rolling application deadline, so is currently open and accepting applications and is available for communities that have been impacted by natural disasters. So both of these programs and grants through the EDA, along with the USDA through the Rural Business Development Grant, EcoStrat provides full grant writing services for both of these, from all these programs we're talking about here. But I'm just going to wrap up here, and I know we're approaching just the end of the webinar today. If you want to contact me to reach out and learn a little bit more about a rating and how it might be able to support your region in terms of attracting bio-based investment, my email is listed here on the screen along with Jordan's. But what I'm going to do, Jack, I think we have a little bit of time just before we wrap up the webinar and session today. So I'm just going to pass things back to you, Jack, to moderate some of the Q&A, and maybe we can just answer any questions that anyone has that's on the call today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ryan, and thanks to the whole team of speakers here. Really appreciate your all's insight, and I know the attendees really have appreciated that as well. So I'll kick things off and encourage folks to continue to throw some questions in the chat, and we'll try to address them. I know the EcoStrat team, thank you. You guys have already been addressing some of these, but perhaps we could circle back if folks weren't directly watching the chat, or if you wanted to build off anything. A couple themes, perhaps. I know Laura was mentioning this, as well as a few of the other speakers, of kind of what to prepare for in advance and know. And I think you guys referenced how to access doing the free trial, Ryan, and how to access that data. But from both the EcoStrat perspective, or both from Robert or Laura, any other recommendations for kind of what you need to know to prepare, and what data or info or partners to have in place? And then also the timing to understand what that is going to take. Jordan, you were addressing some of that in the chat. Big picture, what's the time commitment that this all takes, and that you work with the folks there once they have a BDO zone. So perhaps the first one to you guys, and then the second one on the timing.
I can
Ryan, you want to handle that,
Yeah,
Laura?
yeah, for sure. So in terms of the timeline for how long it takes us to put together the actual technical assessment itself, it'll take anywhere between really 2 to 3 months to put together the rating itself. It really just depends on how quickly we can get in contact with the on-the-ground suppliers and stakeholders to validate the feedstock and the different risks that we look at and do the due diligence on our end. For the program through the USDA and the Rural Business Development Grant, that's available. We're expecting an end of February deadline for that specific program. And yeah, if you're interested in learning more about this program specifically and how it might be able to support your region, I'm happy to share a checklist that'll just break down what would be required in order to apply for an application. But yeah, Laura, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. If you want to provide a little bit more color on that as well.
No, you answered the question. I just hate silence. Just kidding.
Let's see, a couple other things in the chat. Yeah, just quickly, you mentioned the timeline of the USDA grant specifically, Ryan. Is it feasible for folks to still work with you guys within this time? I know it's another question about timeline, but just to clarify that, folks still encouraged to reach out to you and this
Yeah.
month and be able to work that out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We were able to turn around applications in a pretty tight deadline. But the NOFO for this program hasn't been officially released as of yet. We're expecting an end of February deadline, so that's what we're planning towards. But yeah, if you're interested in pursuing an application for this upcoming round, feel free to reach out and shoot me an email, and we can set up a time to discuss what an application would look like for your region.
There was also a question from Kirsten. What's the cost of an application? There's no cost to make an application. And there's no cost to have our teams draft the application and support you in that submission for the application.
And I can say that from our perspective, because of course that was a question, what if we don't get the grant? And they said, well, then you can decide whether, you want to move forward with the project. And we got the grant, so we didn't have to worry about that.
Yeah, that was our experience as well. And I think that the reason why it's so timely is that these guys have experience having done just numerous studies. So, it's a lot of it's template, and the rest of us, we know our regions, we know our stakeholders, we've got our SEDs, we've got the basic information there to plug in. So it was for us, it was relatively easy to apply because EcoStrat did the heavy lifting on that. So we appreciated that, and then it went pretty straightforward from there.
Thanks, y'all. Ryan, Jordan, there was another question earlier on. Maybe you guys could speak a little bit to, we have, as you know, folks from regional organizations here representing kind of wide swaths. We may have some folks from a specific local government, may already have some site specific things in their mind. Can you speak more about what the scale is? Is there any preference? Is it all just going to depend on each project, but versus, should I do this for my whole region? Should I do this for a county? I just have one site that I really want to promote. What's the scale like? And again, it differs, all across the board, but if you could just speak to that.
Yeah, and the size of the zone that we look at for the supply basin where we're assessing the feedstock is about 75 miles. The actual BDO zone itself, where we do the infrastructure assessment, is about 25 miles. But exactly to your point, Jack, typically where the rating is best centered is around an industrial site or a property where you could really envision a project coming in and setting up shop. So if you have an industrial park or a business park where you're looking to attract a project to, that is really a great center point for BDO zone rating.
And that was our experience, where we got 17.5 million acres, and that's obviously way too big. So centered on, kind of ground zero, where, in the middle of Prince of Wales Island, identify the community that historically was the logging camp, put together the BDO zone with a 75-mile radius. Then we had a competitive zone that, kind of said, well, you build from there and you go from here. So I really appreciate the methodology that EcoStrat has on that.
Trying to monitor the chat, but certainly don't want to be the one hogging all the questions here. I'm not seeing ton of other ones. I may throw one to you, Nick, as the, kind of representing the developer and private sector, and maybe perhaps open-ended. I know you spoke to this some, just in general for folks representing local economic development, regional economic development entities, whether it's from nonprofit or structured as, series of member governments. What are steps they can take, whether it's through the BDO zone or perhaps otherwise, to help, generally work with you all as in private sector as developers to build off their assets? Are there any other tips that you would recommend in engaging with the private sector from the public sector?
Well, the BDOZ is just a proactive approach that they can take to help simplify the process for developers, right? We need to build more projects quicker, right? And we don't often know exactly where that's going to lead us, but if somebody takes the time, effort, and energy to put together a study and that helps us early answer those questions, that gives us direction. So I think it's a very proactive approach for an economic development folks that are interested in creating jobs and spurring investments within their city, county, region. So I just think very highly of the whole thing. It's helped us immensely.
Yeah, Nick, I think you hit the nail on the head. And Andrew, you said it as well earlier when you said it's the difference between being proactive and being reactive. And the fact of the matter is, most communities around this great nation are reactive, right? Meaning they wait for an inbound call from a project developer like Nick Andrews, and then they react and try like hell to make that project come to life, right? And it's great and it works, but it's fundamentally reactive at its core, right? Getting a BDO zone rating gives our regions, our rural communities, the ability to proactively go after that exact same goal. Andrew, you said it before. Nick, you emphasized it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ryan, Jordan, Team EcoStrat, any other comments to add or questions perhaps to throw at Robert, Laura, or Andrew, or Nick while we've got folks still on the call here. I know we've crossed the top of the hour, but folks still sticking around here a little bit.
Not for me, Ryan.
Yeah, no, I think that really sums it up. And if you're interested in looking into this for the region, feel free to reach out to me. I'll just pop my email in the chat right now. It's ryan@ecostrat.com. But yeah, I know Jack will share the recording later today and the slides with everyone who's able to make it, and also not able to make the call today, but appreciate you all taking the time out of your busy day.
Yeah, thank you all so much. Thanks, EcoStrat. Thanks to the rest of our presenters, and look forward to seeing all of you all either in person at a NATO event or certainly online at any time. Thanks for dropping your information, Ryan and EcoStrat team, and look forward to seeing you all again soon. And thanks again.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you all.